I'm here on the Shed Talks sofa at Bike Shed with Jim Hamilton. Jim.
Hey, Dutch.
And really thankful to have you here on the couches for a bit of a chat. And obviously a lot of you guys will be thinking, well, what's Jim doing on the show? Obviously known as an international rugby player, bit of a legend, and but also host of a podcast. But a lot of people won't know you're also a motorcycle rider.
Loosely.
Well, no, if you ride a bike, you're one of those people that always apologises for not riding enough. You've got to stop doing that.
Yeah, I should do. I should be more confident. But no, it's great to be here. I hang out here in the days, as you know, and we've connected over the last few years. You came on my podcast, and it's kind of now part of my life coming to the Bike Shed, which is really cool. I'm not a member yet. I need to sign up, don't I?
We absolutely need to sort you out with that.
Yeah. But I come to the shows every year, and it's cool. It's actually a welcome break for me in the world that I'm in of rugby and sport and podcasting. I like coming here. I talk about bikes, or people talk to me about bikes, and I actually get to speak and listen to stuff that I have a real kind of personal interest in, a hobby, I suppose. And that's how we connected. And it's cool. I said to you off camera, I love coming in. So it's it's one of the things that when I'm on the road, I think about obviously being at home with the family. I think, right, when I'm in London, I get to the Bike Shed and just chill, do a bit of admin, read some of the books. I actually have something to tell you as well. I borrowed a book, Ewan McGregor's and Charlie Boardman's book that I need to bring back. I forgot to mention to you, but I'm reading that in a minute as well. I just borrowed it, yeah.
The Bike Shed library. We should have little library cards.
I know, yeah, just from under the plant pot there. So, yeah, I'm telling you now, live, so you can't moan.
Owning it, I love that. Well, I mean, the other thing you're owning, or maybe you shouldn't own, is this idea of being this apologetic, I don't ride enough rider, because the thing that Bike Shed really stands for is it's about moto culture. It's not about people who've had their knee down on the Nürburgring. It really is for everybody, and in a way, it makes you really representative of the kind of people that come here, actually, because you know there are a lot of people that sometimes people join the club and they go, well, I've only been riding 6 years. And or they apologise that they've never done a track day. And I think the thing that people underestimate is getting a motorcycle licence at all is quite a difficult thing. You know, buying a motorcycle is a commitment. Finding someone to insure you is complicated. And once you've been through some of those rites of passage, you're definitely part of something. And maybe we should start there. Let's talk a little bit about your biking history and your biking background. What got you into bikes and why do you ride? Yeah,
so maybe I'll give a bit more context on maybe my upbringing, and that might open things up and become more clearer of why I'm interested in there. So I played professional rugby for 15 years, played for Scotland, played for Leicester, Gloucester, Saracens, and played in France as well. But I don't come from a stereotypical rugby background, which is private school and all of these things that people think, especially in England, that that's what it is. I actually grew up on a council estate in Coventry in Middle England, even though I am Scottish, and kind of fell into rugby because of my size. I'm 6'8", 125 kgs, and it was kind of a good fit for me. But as much as I like rugby and love what rugby's done for me, I've always had other interests outside of that, in music, fashion, not that I'm fashionable, motorbikes, cars, history and culture. And when you're playing sport, you're so consumed by doing that, you very rarely get time to indulge in other things, especially riding bikes. I was into cars. I had a couple of old Mustangs and stuff, a couple of new Mustangs, an old Toyota Land Cruiser, but you never got to kind of reap the benefits of the busy career that you had. So when I retired from rugby, which was 8 years ago now, it's tough. You know, they call it transition from one career into another career or another life. And I spent a while kind of searching about who I was, like what my interests were, like where do I go, what do I do, who are my people? Because I said, even though I was in that rugby fraternity, a lot of them go into finance, they go into the city, and that just wasn't me. So it took me about 4 or 5 years to kind of work out what I wanted to do, where my hobbies lay, and it wasn't golf. A lot of the lads will go and play golf. I'm stereotyping like the English rugby quintessential gentleman, and like the stuff that I was interested in was bikes, was travel. Part of my job, I get to travel around the world, like South Africa. I go to the US, New Zealand. Not that when I go to these places I get a bike, but the stuff that I find myself listening to would be bikes and people doing up old bikes. I'm a fan of Jason Momoa. There's a rugby link in with him, and looking at some of the stuff that he did with Harley Davidson, I just thought it was cool. I was like, oh, that's something that I'm really interested in. So I didn't go straight into bikes and all the stuff that I wanted to do straight after rugby. It took me a while to kind of work my way through. And I rode a bike when I was in France, which was the only place when you were contracted that they allowed you to ski and ride motorbikes. When you're in England or Scotland, you weren't allowed contractually from an insurance perspective to ride bikes. But I rode a Harley in France, and I used to think about that all the time because I loved it so much, but I couldn't work out what I loved so much about it. But it was all the things that people talk about, that we spoke about when you were on my podcast, and other people that you speak to. I enjoyed the freedom. I enjoyed being laser focused on something, and when I ride a bike, which isn't as much as I'd like to or should do, it takes me back to being focused on one thing, and that sense of kind of freedom, and that I'm doing something that I love and enjoy doing.
I mean, it's interesting, you talk about sort of rebuilding your life after doing a thing. I mean, we get that a lot with military people, people who've been in the police force, sports people. They also go through this really early peak of kind of human fitness and human performance, and also, as you say, laser focus on something that they have to be incredibly good at. And I think I'm realizing that motorcycles become quite a common theme for people after that, because for some people it's about escape, for some people it's about speed, for some people it's about adventure, for other people it's about belonging. But all of those things seem to point in the direction of mental health and just keeping yourself together. And I know that's something we talked a lot about, and you're interested in that. And I think, it's something, and I know you champion as well. But how much do you find that sort of almost mental mindfulness in riding plays a role in why it sort of draws you in?
Yeah, you said the word mindfulness. I didn't say that, I couldn't think of the word, but that's what it is. Being present, freedom, but the mindfulness around that. And I know a lot of people talk about the military. I'm actually from a military background. My father was in the military. I grew up in the military, hence the hybrid accent as well. And I know a lot of people that you speak to around this space as well come from the military, right? And they've been on this same transition journey as I have. I know you probably go a little bit longer in the military, but you have that point when you play professional sport that your best years of your life are up until 34. If you get that far, a lot of lads will retire a lot younger, and you lose that sense of belonging and that sense of purpose and that laser focused freedom that you have when you're attached to a sport. And I was really lucky to play sport at the highest level, but it comes with its challenges after. It's not just me saying that. You speak to anyone who comes from sport, and then on the other industry you mentioned there, in the military as well. And that's why a lot of people, even in my industry of sport, will either take to the golf course because that gives them that sense of mindfulness and peace and purpose and art and skill, however you look at it. But the cooler guys head to the bikes, and you hear them similar kind of stories, that it gives them freedom, it gives them peace, it gives them something to focus in on and a purpose. And every time I go out on my bike, that's exactly how I feel, because it's chaos. As a man, it's chaotic anyway. Like like you're a man. There's so many different pools, social media, growing a business, growing a brand, bringing up children, like being a husband, and being different to who I am now to who I was, which was a professional athlete. I am Jim Hamilton, the international rugby player, and then you are no longer. So you go through this journey of, I suppose, evolution and also learning about yourself and who you are. And I've actually obviously found it difficult, right? Because it's not easy, because not only are you dealing with that, you're dealing with a broken body as well. Contact sport, a lot of head trauma that goes with that as well, a lot of operations. But I've actually enjoyed the journey, and I'm nowhere near there yet. At the end of the journey, I'm just at the start of it, of learning and thinking about who I am as a man now. And part of that I find is, when I get on a bike, I kind of really zone in to that kind of level of thinking as well.
I think motorcycles for me, with the people I talk to, are this anchor. And one of the reasons that we do these shed talks isn't necessarily to talk to people that are sort of hardcore motorcyclists. It's actually talk to people through the lens of motorcycling. Because, and you look at the actors who ride or the musicians who ride, it's that common ground. We use that phrase a lot, we chuck it around. But it really is a powerful thing. It's a great leveler. And also it's a leveler that people enjoy for lots of different reasons. But you get the same thing whether people ride or race or build, whether they do off-road, whether they do adventure, whether they ride in a pack or whether they ride solo. It answers a lot of questions to an awful lot of people's issues. And I think, we talked about the effect on sort of mental health a lot. But I think for me, it sort of does give people that kind of common purpose. And also, it's a constant evolution, a constant journey of where do you go in your biking life. I mean, you've just bought this hardtail chop. You were showing Kane the pictures earlier.
Yeah.
So you clearly also love the aesthetics of it. But, who knows what you'll be riding in 5 years' time. But actually, let's talk about that bike, because it's interesting, because I speak to so many people who ride, and choice of ride, I'm always interested in what triggers that. What drew you to the idea of the Harley and also getting a hardtail chop? It's not exactly a sort of an easy choice of bike to ride. Which is the nugget that makes you go, that's the kind of bike for me?
Yeah, well, I mentioned at the start, I'm 6'8", 6'9" with heels, so I'm extremely tall and therefore limited in what I could ride. And my first bike was a Harley Davidson when I was in France. I actually fell off the bike when I took it out the showroom, which was embarrassing. It cost me a lot of money as well, and I didn't have the heart to go back in and tell them. I scraped all the side of the Harley Breakout, and only now do I realise it's actually one of the hardest bikes that you could ride. I've been on some adventure bikes as well, but I've always been a fan of like history and heritage and brand. I know that Harley has its littered and it's kind of dirty past and history, but I suppose from a cheesy perspective, when you'd watch Sons of Anarchy or you'd watch old movies and stuff like that, actually having spent time in South Africa and the military, and they've got the old Harleys dotted about and stuff like that, there's always been a kind of a draw for that as a brand, I suppose, and the fact that it's a big bike. So that was probably the first point for me where it's like, right, well, I can afford a Harley, I want to get one, I'm in France, I'm allowed to ride one, and the roads are good, so let's go and practice from that point of view. But I find myself when I'm like looking at old books and chopper books, or I go onto YouTube and my algorithm is full of people building and taking apart and refurbishing choppers, that I've always had a real interest in that. But in the UK, they're not easy to come by at all. And again, you look at the stuff that Momoa and his mates have done around the world when they did the series for Harley. I thought, oh, that looks really cool. How can I do that on a lower level, put a slit in my eyebrow and get on a bike and look like a cheap Jason Momoa? It wasn't that. I'm not that sad. But yeah, I suppose I did a little bit more research into it, and the podcast that we did brought in biker fans and people that are interested in bikes who've started reaching out. So I started connecting with a few different people that I then followed, and then naturally your algorithm pops up and be like, oh, I like the look of that bike, oh, that's a chopper, or you can re-spin a dyno, or what do you call it, a hardtail? Yeah, a hardtail.
No suspension, hurts your bum.
Yeah, exactly.
The hardtail.
Yeah, but it looks cool.
It looks very cool.
It looks cool, and I thought I wanted to get something with a bit of history and a little bit of heritage, and actually posted some pictures of the bike on social media. And this American guy said, oh, I was involved in the build of that, and there's some parts were brought from America. And I thought, that's really cool, because the only other bikes that I bought before were a brand new Harley Davidson Breakout and a second-hand Harley Davidson Breakout as well. So I wanted to buy something with a bit more history, a little bit more kind of heritage and soul, and I'll probably be the only guy in Scotland riding around on one of these old school chopper-looking bikes. So, and I'm happy about that as well.
I mean, they're certainly a thing, and they really stand for something. And I'm really intrigued to see where you go with it next, because obviously looking at the size of you, adventure bikes is a pretty obvious thing. What would be your perfect day out on a motorcycle?
Well, I've had a couple of them actually. I went up to the Highlands in Scotland with a mate of mine who I played rugby with. He's a coach now. He actually coaches the team in Glasgow. He brought up in Botswana, so he's got a great backstory as well. And I knew that he was into bikes, but again, because he's coaching or whatever, we just went on an impromptu ride up to the Highlands. And in Scotland, the weather's obviously not great, so struggling to get a decent day can be limited to maybe 4 or 5 days a year, but we got one. And we went up on our bikes. It wasn't on the chopper. That's going to be the next ride that we do. But going as far north as possible, and the scenery up there. Everyone talks about New Zealand and Canada, which are beautiful countries. I've been lucky enough to go there. But on a decent day, driving up to the Highlands in Scotland, a country that I absolutely adore, with the history and the heritage, I mentioned all of these things, there's nothing better than doing that. But I mean, I would love to go further afield. I was saying to you that I go to America quite a lot. I'm looking at human optimization and stem cell and stuff like that, all of these things that they're doing in Austin, Texas, and around the NFL. I'm interested in that, and I'm going back there in the summer, but I'd love to go out on a ride in America through the Texas outback, and and it's something that I think about quite a lot, as in like the dream scenario to do that. And generally, you know, people say, you know, when you dream of something or you think about doing something, it normally doesn't live up to that expectation. But every time I've thought about going out on the bike and going up to the Highlands in Scotland and I do it, I have them moments of like wow, like I feel so alive. And I was in Colorado in the summer, and I had the same moment as well. I went out, and it wasn't a long ride, it was maybe like a couple of hours up into the mountains, and I had that moment as the sun was going down. I was like, wow, this is a sense of feeling alive, a sense of belonging and freedom, that the only comparable I have, or as close as I've been to that moment, was running out into a full stadium as a professional athlete, ready to go into, you know, a modern day coliseum as a modern day gladiator and play a contact sport in the name of entertainment, and not ever having that feeling again, like being out on the bike, especially that time in Colorado that I think back to, gave me that sense of feeling like that. And doing it with a mate as well and connecting, because we weren't mic'd up or anything. Like, we were just riding and overtaking each other and like just smiling and just like ragging the bike. And we're not experienced riders, right? But I could see he was thinking the same as me. We were looking around in the mountains, and it was like, we're like, how fucking cool is this? And we'd stop off and we'd get a coffee. We'd be like, you know, you're just connecting. And then he started opening up about how he's been finding things tough or whatever. And I think then that kind of moment of, I suppose, purpose, connection, and I suppose freedom allowed him and us to maybe have some kind of open conversations which we wouldn't normally have, right? Which I know everyone's talking about men talking and all of these things, but that just allowed us to do it because I think there was a sense of the guard was down. You know, you're super focused. There's a sense of vulnerability when you're on the bike as well, and a long way around answering your question. But, you know, going out with a mate on the bikes up to the Highlands a few months ago was pretty cool.
It's really interesting to hear you talk about that feeling of running out onto a pitch. Almost those peak moments in your life where tens of thousands of people cheering you on. You know, you're in this kind of 0.01% of humans that get to experience those kinds of things when a match is won, or something's achieved, or musicians on stage in front of 10,000, 20,000, 30,000 people. You've lived through some incredibly powerful experiences on a very human level that, I mean, I don't know enough about the way the human brain works, but there must be this overload of experience. And it's interesting how often I hear people who've been through those kind of high-level experiences, whether they're musicians or military or being in sports, or fighter pilots, that go back to motorcycling and say, well, that gives you that same thing again. I mean, I'd love to know more about what happens to the human brain when you're on a motorcycle and you're kind of riding through the curves. So clearly you felt that with your mate. Do you think there's a reason why it then makes people open up? Because I think it does. I think I have some incredible conversations with people when I'm riding.
Yeah, I think it comes down to a common purpose, a common interest. Maybe there's a sense of vulnerability because you might feel unsafe on the bike, and it maybe then opens up and a load of different pathways. Like psychologically, I don't know the reasons why, but I know that it is a thing, because things that you read about people who go out on bikes, you know, I've got mates in the military who go out and they seem a lot more receptive to them things. And the thing is, there is this now forum for people to open up and have the conversation, especially, you know, people that would hang around here, right? It's a kind of big talking point around men's health. Mental health specifically. Can I just explain a little bit around the what it's like being an athlete when you run out, just to have a comparison there. My lad, who's now 15, asked me, he said, "Oh, Dad, what was it like running out in the stadium?" And he asked me when we were at an international match, And I do a podcast where there's a lot of self-deprecation, there's a lot of joking, there's lots of banter, however you want to look at it. And I suppose the reason for that is maybe a mask, because I don't really want to go back the way. I'm always thinking about what's in front, what's next. And I know the reason why, because it's not just that. The reason is because I wouldn't allow myself to go there and talk about what it was like, because it was so good and so, as a man, so alive that I've ever felt. I've never felt more alive. And when I was explaining it to my lad, when he asked me, I could feel myself getting emotional. I said, when you're at the gates about to walk onto the pitch and you've trained all your life to run out into a stadium of 80,000 people, it is a gladiatorial moment. Like, that's how you feel. And I'm getting goosebumps talking about it now, because when you walk out there, you're looking up, you don't care whether you live or die. And I know that that's an extreme thing to say, but when you are in the zone, when you are locked in, that was the mindset that we had. It's different now, the game has moved on and there's a lot more strategy and player welfare and all of these things. But when I played, it was go out there and be as physical and as nasty and as violent as you can be. And to get into that state of mind isn't easy. Right? I wasn't an overly gifted athlete, but I could get to them levels of emotion and aggression that brought me up through my life. I grew up in the streets of Coventry, so I had that in me. But to do that every week was exhausting. So then to go back and explain to my son specifically, my other children probably will ask me about it, I found it extremely emotional, because that, and I spoke about being in the mountains of Colorado on a bike and feeling alive. I've not had them moments a lot, and not many people, like you said, 0.01%, unless you've had that moment, won't truly know what it feels like. And that's why you mentioned like musicians, maybe actors and actresses to a degree, but a lot of that is kind of manufactured and start again. Like them moment of 80,000, 100,000 people just cheering, and that kind of energy that is on top of you in the name of entertainment, right? But as a young athlete, you've got to think, like these lads, we were young doing it. We were 23, 24, 25 years old. And like, you're a young human being, like you're not fully developed, like mentally, you know, you don't know what's coming in 10 years time. You can't think about them things. So I came to the realization, the fact that, you know, when I retired and I kind of limped out of the game, had a few big injuries, I had a thyroidectomy, I had my thyroid removed, had a kind of screw put in my rib, and, you know, multiple kind of issues after. I resigned to the fact that I would never feel them moments again. And that's why I said, like, going on the bike allowed me to feel something close to that. And I've had a couple of moments that I mentioned there where you had that moment of like, wow. And then also the human connection, like man to man, like you're in a testosterone fueled game with like-minded men together, you're tight, you know, and you're connected the whole time. And when you come out of that and it's switched off, there is no longer that. But I know now, chatting to a lot of mates, and my mate Roddy on the bike, that when you lose that human connection and the space then opens up, when you do find that moment of meeting again, and some of it can be a point where you've hit rock bottom, but the other point for us was, well, we hadn't hit rock bottom, we just hit the road, we hit the middle of the road, and we found that kind of junction in time to then connect again. And that was powerful. Actually, the more that I speak about it, I've never contextualized it, you know, we just did it. And he texted me after saying, mate, how fucking cool was that? I was like, mate, it was unreal. Like, it was amazing. And, you know, he's got kids as well, and you're constantly thinking about your family, which is important. But for that moment, we weren't thinking about anything else. We were thinking about the road. We were thinking about heading north. I'm looking at him, he's looking at me, we're smiling, we're connected. And as an athlete, you have them connections all the time, like, yeah, high fives, come on, the whole time. And then you retire and it's, you know, you're thinking about your wife, thinking about the mortgage, you're thinking about the kids, and rightly so, right? That's what it is as a father, as a man to be able to do. But as I kind of ad-lib and spitball my way through that answer, it kind of brings back memories of what it's like to connect with other men.
I mean, you sort of say rightly so, we have to think about our mortgages and our kids and our families, and I think, you know, you're talking about the life that we've been living now as human beings for the last tiny sliver of existence of, you know, 10,000 years of sort of, you know, history and 3.5 million years of evolution since the last common species of man, but we are designed as men for this singular focus. And how much do you think that escape is important? Because, in sport, you're focused on just that sport. All you've got to do is achieve a goal. And there are some very simple rules around that, and simple relationships as well. This guy's on your side, that guy's the enemy. And on motorcycles, there's a real simplicity of purpose. But you've got to do an awful lot to achieve it. So how much do you think taking away all the noise on the outside is actually the thing that we need sometimes for survival and to just keep us grounded?
It's everything, mate. You said the word there, simple. Life isn't simple now, and this is all new. The less simple things now are unknown. Social media, digital multitasking, thinking about a million other things. Like, this is all new. I interviewed a musician, actually, Stephen Wilson Jr., a great musician, and we were talking about fame and fortune, and he was like, mate, it's 80 years old. You know what I mean? People being famous is 80, 100, like it's in human existence. This is all new. We don't know how to deal with it, right? And there's this real pushback, I suppose, and a big shift from where it's been the last 10 years into simplicity, into craft, into being present, into reading instead of flicking, in being present, all of these things. And we know that, right? We know that as men, we know that as fathers, and I think it's, I think things will change now. I think that's why there is this, I suppose, a movement now. There's this kind of global movement. I know there's so much stuff going on in the world now, which is really difficult to migrate through. But when you break it down, we're all looking for the simple things in life: the smell of the coffee, feeling grounded outside, the sun on your face. Things as a young man that I took for granted. Right, I'd be outside all the time. I had a simple job: go and run through that guy or tackle that guy. And then all of a sudden, and it was the time, right? I retired in 2018, just pre-COVID, right? You lived on your phone during COVID. You had no control of your life. It wasn't simple. It was far from simple. And then in that moment, you have your kids as well, and you're trying to migrate through life with them. And simplicity and the simple life, I think, is what everyone, men specifically, because I'm a man, and obviously, as men, we're talking, right? Men are a lot more complex than people think. Women, my wife especially, is quite simple in her approach to life. I'm chaos, you know what I mean? Or creative, however you look at it. And I think I'm lucky enough now to have men in my life and influences, like I include yourself in that, like people, because we have discussions, we have private conversations around that, is we're trying to look for a simpler, plainer, I suppose more, I don't know how you say it, like a more authentic existence, because it feels less and less authentic, and that's a hard thing, right? You're in the same space as me. You're trying to grow a brand, you're trying to grow a business. Everything's about social media, right? Where are we going to put our phone there? Right? How do we do this edit? Like, look natural, which is all unnatural, right? And it's not simple. It's not a simple existence. So, yeah, again, waffling my way through a kind of answer.
I think what you're trying to say, having spoken to you a lot before, is we're looking for meaning. We're looking for why we're here. I mean, isn't that the whole great question for humanity? As soon as we became self-aware, and most animals don't know they're going to die, right? Humans know an awful lot that we shouldn't know, probably, about ourselves. So we want to know, why are we here? What's it all about? And I think we now live in such a complex world. Something came up on something I was watching the other day about the fact that kids at school now are, for the first time in generations, showing less cognitive ability than previous generations. So generation after generation, cognition and ability to think and have critical thinking and rationalization's been improving, and now suddenly it's not. It's going backwards. And I think, we're looking at the world we live in now, because it's the same world the kids live in, it's overwhelming. It's incredibly complex. Everything is multitasked. Everything is recorded, captured, monitored, repeated back. And so I think that search for meaning and simplicity is incredibly important, and we need to be able to get back to that. And I think there are lots of things that people use to ground themselves. Sport's one of them. Loving sport, following sport, playing sport. Music is another one. Playing music, listening to music, loving music, appreciating it. And I think, and the arts, all these things that people love to do to take themselves away from the chaos. And I think motorcycles is one of those things. So that's kind of my interpretation of, I think, what you're saying really is we need something to ground us, to bring us together, and to take us away from that chaos. And then it allows your brain to open up and maybe have a conversation with a mate that you wouldn't normally have.
Yeah. Another experience that I had recently, I don't know if you're an Oasis fan, I'm an Oasis fan. At Murrayfield they played, I know they'd done a load of gigs before that, so whether you like Oasis or not, it could be your favourite band. I grew up on Oasis when life was simpler, right? So I've got great memories where life was simple. And I had the best experience of my life outside of rugby was at the Oasis concert, and the reason was it wasn't just the concert. The guys were miles away, could barely see them. Sun was out, that added to the occasion. But what made it so special was there was a process in the lead up to it, okay? Didn't get given tickets, so I didn't get it instantaneously. It wasn't a case of, right, I'm gonna buy tickets instantaneously. I had to wait, I had to queue, I had to show patience to get the tickets to go and see my favourite band. And then it didn't happen tomorrow, right? It was a 6-month wait. So the excitement of having to wait to go to that event, right? Then walk to the event, went to the pub with the mates and stuff like that. Walked up, how cool is this? What about this? What about that? And you saw this group of people all going to one place together, happy, joyful, and being in the moment at that concert where you've been waiting for something so long to happen. You've done the work in terms of paying for your ticket, in terms of being patient online to get your tickets. And then there's this big build-up, and you don't have these things in life now, do you? Everything's instantaneously. Me and my wife and my mates were like, how good is this? And it wasn't just because of the band, it was the whole process around it. And yeah, we took a few photos and a few videos when we were there, and you just saw the energy and the people of being brought together, because they'd gone on the same journey, right? All walks of life, right? But in that moment, you're as one, and you're happy. And I just thought that was like another moment in my life. I was like, why was that so good? And I went back and said, because it wasn't instantaneous. It wasn't, give me now, right, I'm gonna go and do it. Right, okay, get it delivered, like the Amazon thing, right, get the ticket sent through. You know, it felt kind of a little bit premium because you couldn't get them. So I really enjoyed that part of it. And then I suppose the other aspect that you mentioned there was about kind of like, I suppose the simplicity. What I like about bikes as well is similar to when I played sport is, albeit I'm complex, I am quite a simple man. A to B. So when you get on the bike, where am I going? So start here, I'm going there. You know what I mean? And you can obviously take detours and you can do all of them things, but I am at my best. I'm at my most alive when I know where I'm going. Do you know what I mean? The confusion of not knowing where I'm going or the unknown sometimes can be exciting. But I actually feel as if, you know, when you get on a bike, start at A, you get to B.
I mean, you describe simplicity and you describe yourself being quite a simple person, but you're clearly very self-aware. And I think you hit on something I hadn't thought about before. Going to that Oasis concert, you earned it. You earned it, and then you had to wait, and then you had anticipation. And then when you arrived, you had shared common purpose with a whole bunch of other people that earned it, that had to queue up, then had to wait, and then had to turn up for this special moment that's happening right now. It's live. That's a live band on stage. You know, watching it back is not going to be the same thing. You know, people talk a lot about who have you seen in concert. I get that question all the time. And then you start reeling off the people you've seen, and you kind of hear the jealousy or the envy, and that goes both ways of what they've seen and what you've seen. And I think earning it is a really big thing, and I hadn't really thought about that before. So thank you for that.
Yeah, the concerts are great though. Like the music is, for me, like they are probably similar as an athlete, but also, you know, just us as people. I went to watch the Rolling Stones in Philadelphia, and I swear that I wouldn't get my phone out, but I had to. Mick Jagger was so close, and but yeah, that was just another moment where I'm like, this is incredible. So music does it for me as well. Going to see people that are super talented in their craft, who probably are going through the same thing as what I've been through in terms of like, how do you come down from playing in front of 100,000 people? Well, we know how they used to come down back in the day. Yeah. Obviously, it's different now, but yeah.
Well, it's the problem, isn't it? It's living up to those moments. I mean, we have these moments in life, and I can tick off a whole bunch of moments in my life that I anticipated that were really special, really. I mean, every year when we do the show, for me, it's this big build-up to our big event where 20,000 people come to Tobacco Dock and experience the Bike Shed show, and that show is who we are. You know, bringing those people together. That's our tribe. We're showing them our stuff that we've curated. And then we spend all of the time in between trying to live up to that experience again and again and again. And I think motorcycles do give you that daily bite. And I say daily because the context for me is commuting to work on a motorcycle. Because a lot of people say, oh, how much do you ride? And I'll always say not as much as I'd like to, especially now I'm mostly back in the UK. But I used to love my commute to work. Riding to and from work is like this magical break. It's only 15 minutes, but 15 minutes on a motorcycle twice a day is like therapy. Even though you're riding through London traffic and there are all these signs that say 20 miles an hour and all these yellow cameras that want to catch you doing 40. But the whole point for me is the game, the escape, the mindfulness, the moment. And I think you're really helping me get a sense of that connection between those people in sports, in music, in the military. You've had these peak moments, and why motorcycling draws them, why it pulls them in to sort of recreate that. And in some ways, I think it's almost like a longer form version, because you can be on the road for quite a long period of time, going through sweeping bends. And I just went to Wales last week to ride the new Multistrada V4 Rally, and it's just a press thing organised by Ducati, but wow, what a bonding experience with the people I was riding with. And you know, I was there with a few people I hadn't really spent any time before with. One of them was Jay Morton, and you come away bonded with those people just a little bit more. You know, everybody on that trip, we're all going to be the people that were on that trip. So I think, you know, you're sort of very eloquently making those connections for me.
Yeah. Do you know what else as well? And this is the same as sport. You look at bike content, you look at the interest in bikes, the community, the chopper community, the racing bike community. I imagine the touch points that are in their millions, right? But how many people actually ride a bike? And it shows you, doesn't it, that there's a real interest around the world of motorcycles, but the mass majority of people, you probably know this better than me, actually don't ride, but people are looking at it and they're like, well, that's cool. Like, it's not just about the bike, it's about the travel, it's about the person, it's about fashion, it's about music, it's about culture. And sitting in the middle of that is obviously the bike shed, right? That's what it is. That's why I come here. It's not just, you know, I see the bikes. I don't know much about bikes at all, like very limited. But I come because it's more than that. When if I go to events, or I go to the show every year, or I go to stuff in Scotland or Ireland, but I'm going because of all the different stuff around it. And that's where a lot of people will be interested in bikes and looking at the clips, because they're looking at something that, one, is quite hard to do. It's not easy to ride a bike. You've mentioned it there. Some people see it as dangerous, which obviously has that other element of interest in it. If it was just at this kind of low level, well, that's all right. Yeah, there isn't that interest. But the real interest in biking is because there's so many different touch points. I know I keep saying, oh, I don't ride it, you know, I feel a bit embarrassed saying that, but I know that the community is growing now, because it isn't just about getting on the bike, it's everything else that lives around it, right?
I think if you've experienced, even if you've only ever ridden a motorcycle once, you're now a bike rider or a biker, however you want to describe yourself, because you've had that feeling, you've had that understanding. Even for people who just go on a test day off-road with Desert Rose on electric bikes, you've suddenly in that position of being in control of a machine that's trying to do things that you can't do as a human, with speed and movement and agility, and learning a skill and then achieving it, and then being physically tired and mentally tired at the end of the day. Those things are very powerful. I mean, I'm sure they rewire your brain. But I think you're right. I mean, one of the things that we really want to do, and one of the reasons why we want to bring people like you into the Shed Talks chat, is to expand motorcycling beyond those hardcore bikers. Because my experience growing up into motorcycling was, you go to Rikers, and if you've got a 600cc sports bike, You park with the guys who've got a 600cc sports bike, and you talk to the guys who've got a 600cc sports bike, and you don't talk to the guys who've got a 1000cc sports bike, because their bragging rights are bigger than yours. They've got more CCs. Very tribal, very closed off. If you don't know everything about your bike, if you don't know, the difference between, some people will say, and I've heard people have this conversation here where somebody said, was your bike fuel injected or is it on carbs? And they've looked horrified, like they don't know the answer because they've just bought a Triumph Bonneville and they don't know what year it was and they didn't look. But I kind of think we should celebrate that more. I think what we're trying to do here is remove that need to be an expert, to have got your knee down, to know your lap times around Brands Hatch, or to have done thousands of miles on bikes, or to call other people out for not being a proper biker. Because I think, if you've ridden, you've ridden, but also, as you say, it's a metaphor for people to aspire to. I mean, there's a reason why Jason Bourne and James Bond and all these kind of heroes have to be riding motorcycles in movies, or the bad guy or the outcast on the movie is on a motorcycle. If the dodgy boyfriend is going to turn up to pick up the girl, he's going to turn up on a motorcycle. Those metaphors are powerful, and we want to celebrate that and celebrate everything around the culture, because I think probably 60% of our customers at Bike Shed, the venue, don't ride. And actually I love that, because some of them then do become riders. But it is a really powerful thing. It is a really powerful metaphor. And clearly that draws people in.
Yeah.
And it's drawn you in.
Yeah, it has. Are less people riding now than before? Is there like a number on it? How do you look at metrics and stuff?
I do get all the industry news, and I don't read a lot of it, because for me, they talk about the really big numbers. They talk about how many registered motorcycles there are in various places. And they also talk about a lot of new sales. And one of the things that's happening now is the motorcycle industry is in managed decline. It's being legislated out of existence. It's also harder and harder to get your test because of the health and safety culture that we live in. It's also harder to get insurance because of the whole issues around liability and how much more it costs now, how much more easily a bike is written off, or how much more a person can take out against you if they're physically hurt, and how big their medical bills are going to be. So it's becoming harder and harder physically to ride. And more now, big city infrastructure wants you to take public transport. They want to get people off the roads. They want to get people away from private vehicle ownership. And ideally, they want us all on public transport or driven around in autonomous driving cars so we can't crash into each other.
Isn't it crazy with all the e-bikes flying about though?
Oh, that's crazy. That's a whole side phenomenon, I think, which is really bonkers. But I think it is in an industry in managed decline, but it's also an industry that's shifting from transport into lifestyle. And a lot of journeys aren't A to B anymore, they're A to A. I mean, you talk about going from A to B, but then you probably go back to A, right?
That's a great way of putting it, actually.
So it's changing, and it's becoming a luxury industry. So yes, less people ride, but it's separate to the numbers, because people are registering for scooters and they're getting licenses for transport. But I'm really interested in the people that ride for lifestyle. And the metrics on that are much more complicated. It's what they call the lifestyle sector, or the classic, or the adventure. And people moving into the modern classic bikes or buying vintage. And the other thing is there's a huge market now for second-hand motorcycles. And before, it always used to be about what's new, because technology was advancing so quickly. But now you can buy a bike that's 10 years old and it's awesome. And it's got the same power and performance as a sports bike did 20 years ago, and it's a street bike. So yes, it's in decline, but I think a little bit like vinyl or maybe smoking cigars, it's almost becoming more important, and people seek out that authenticity more and that experience even more.
Yeah, there's definitely a big shift, not just in bikes, is it, but like cars or vinyl or even sofas, and people going for the second hand. Like, tell me where it's from. Like, who sat on it before? What's the history behind it? And that's, again, in my world, there seems to be more of that shift for second-hand thrift shops, they call them.
Well, it's authentic, isn't it? It's got story. I mean, the reason hopefully people will watch a podcast Shed Talk like this is because there's someone really interesting who's authentic, who's got story. You've had an incredible career in sports. You've been at the very peak of it, and you've got a podcast. And you talk about a lot of subjects apart from sport. You're also a bit of a Renaissance man, whether you know it or not, because I'm not even sure I know what that means.
Sounds cool though.
Sounds really cool, just get the t-shirt. But you are someone who's a real thinker. You know, you come out of this brutish world of going out and being the most violent person you could possibly be on a pitch in a gladiatorial arena, but you're a deep thinker, and also you're really good at explaining it. But people are listening to you because you've got a story. So when you have something to say, it's meaningful, and I think you get that in second-hand motorcycles. You also get it in new motorcycles because of all the history and the brand and the engineering that's gone in to create something. So I think we're really drawing on common themes, aren't we?
Yeah. Isn't it really cool when you listen to someone speak who've travelled, or they've got so many life experiences, like good and bad. Like there's nothing better, I think, than when you listen to someone that's like had these lived experiences, and like mentioned it there, and obviously, right, it's happening, but people are pushing towards that. And I'm not perfect. Like I've been down in London for 2 days, and I won't even tell you my screen time. I was working the majority of the time, but I was like, what? You know what I mean? Like, what are we doing here? And more people are pushing towards looking up and traveling and having conversation and reading more and having them experience. I don't think there's anything better than speaking to someone that has, you know, really and truly lived. You know? Well,
I mean, one of the best things about a motorcycle for me is you shouldn't, or you can't look at your screen. I mean, more and more now where somebody goes, oh, we've created this crash helmet and it integrates, you know, even when people say, oh, do you want to have like, you know, sort of comms so that people can phone you on your motorcycle, or they want to integrate other things and have head-up display, I'm like, absolutely not. I mean, the best thing for me when I'm riding is to say, I'm sorry, you can't reach me. And it's the best excuse in the world when I've been trying to reach you all afternoon. I'm like, sorry, I've been riding a motorcycle. Sorry, not sorry. Because I think the amount of screen time we have is, frankly, I personally find it quite embarrassing. I've just moved into a new place and I haven't even bought a TV. I've been there 2 months. And I haven't bought a TV because I'm looking at my laptop and my phone. And then I realise it's 11 o'clock at night, it's time for bed, and I didn't even go looking for a remote control for a TV I don't have. It's an awful addiction, this dopamine hit of the endless scroll. And I think we need things like art, sport, motorcycling, culture, conversation, authentic experience, a trip to a concert, you know, lining up to buy a ticket. We need those things. And you know, Vicky and I talk a lot about the secret mission of Bike Shed isn't just about motorcycles. It's to get people to be more analog. It's to get people away from experiencing the world through a screen, or you know, only seeing a place, you know, through a black box that you're holding. Like, go there, and it's that whole sort of we're using digital to gather a tribe, to give them analog experiences, and then get people in a room, have a proper conversation.
Yeah, you're not alone, obviously, right? I mean, people listening to this and watching this will think exactly the same. We're not telling them anything new or revolutionary, but yeah, that's for sure. And when I was in Colorado, actually, I left my phone for 2 days, and not to go out on the bike, but to spend proper time with the family. Went up to the mountains when we were there, and the first few hours, genuinely, like you're like this, like looking for your phone, I'm like, what? Even to take a picture, not to go on there necessarily. I was like, you know, once you break that and you get through it, again, not reinventing the wheel, not a psychologist here, but significantly better. And you know, I've got 4 children, and you know, and we limit their screen time. You know, we don't have them on the iPads, but the older 2, 15 and 12, have both got mobile phones and not on social media, and there's this constant push against them because everyone in their class is on social media, and we're like, look, you know, you'll thank us in the future, but then we're there on the phone.
It's because we're human, and if adults like us that grew up without it, if it does that to us, what's it doing to young people?
100%.
Because, you know, I grew up with a dial phone and a landline, and I remember getting a pager in the late 80s, early 90s. I mean, I didn't have a computer on my desk till I was 25, 30, and then it was a brick with a tiny screen and didn't really do anything. And now, without a laptop or a phone, I don't know if I could do my job. And my job's supposed to be about motorcycling, burgers and beers, so what's going on there? So I think it's incredibly important that we find things that young people can do that pull them away from that digital connected environment. And we talked a little bit about this with family, but you know, you look at some young people, and I won't embarrass my kids by talking about it, but you look at the phone of one of your kids and they've got 2,000 friends. I'm like, you don't know 2,000 people. I mean, you're famous, I run Bike Shed, I don't know 2,000 people, you know, so what does that even mean? And for them, it's that social credit. The amount of people that follow you and like you is who you are and the value that you carry, and we're all guilty of it. How many followers have you got?
How many views does this get?
How many views is it going to get?
Yeah.
I mean, in a way, wouldn't it be nice to say, as long as one person watches this and they get something from it, we've done our job. But we're going to go and see how popular was this episode, how many people watched it.
Yeah.
And it's a bit of a shame in a way, isn't it?
Well, I think there's a few things when it comes to the positives around social media is connecting with people that might not get to have a connection with us in person, and they might take small bits from this and be like, actually, or when you have people on who've travelled and that inspires them to then go and travel, you know, or they look at, who's the guy who bought, who Brad Pitt bought the bike off? I might buy a bike off him. So there could, you know, there's different kind of touch points around it, but yeah, but that's just being, or that's me being, especially being kind of like positive about it. You know, naturally in my job that I do with a podcast, or how many downloads have we got? Okay, so how do we make that? How do we engage? Where's the hook? So I have this constant kind of like back and forth where you're trying to grow a social media business, you're trying to grow a podcast, you're trying to grow a brand. What does that even mean? You know, like why am I? And you know, because my lad is he plays sport, and I'm there doing videos in the gym or whatever, and he asked me, and it was quite embarrassing. He's like, why are you doing that? I'm like, I don't think so. Why am I doing that? And I know why I'm doing it. I'm doing it, one, because I enjoy doing it, I train. But I also do get a lot of comments and a lot of people interacting, being like, what supplements are you taking? Or, you know, thanks for that. You know, when we did a podcast, or I've done a podcast with different people, and we touch on mental health, or we talk upon training, or whatever it may be, I'll have a lot of people that will reach out and say, really inspired, or like, love that, or I was low. You know, it's entertainment, I suppose, in a way, and you're giving people a release from the daily grind, which a lot of people find themselves in.
But you're also an elite athlete, so people are going to be interested in you, especially coming back to training. I've seen a couple of your videos. And you kind of go, yeah, we have to stay fit, we have to stay healthy. We have to do things that make, you know, the human body can last a really long time if you treat it well, so that's going to be interesting. But I feel like the answer to the question, which I think you deliver on, is just being authentic. And if people like it, they like it. I think that the worst thing is the world we live in right now, where people will do things to be popular. So I see an awful lot of things on social media where I know people are just, you know, it's rage bait, clickbait. They just want people to interact, or they'll say a thing they know is wrong, or show a piece of a video out of context, so you think something different's going to happen, and then you watch it. Or AI, you see a thing and you watch it, and then you go, wait a minute, this isn't even real. And then you're angry, and then you comment and you go, get this AI slop off my feed. But they've won the game, right? You watched it, you interacted. And I think if you keep doing what you're doing, and you're clearly on a journey of self-discovery, self-realization. You've moved from one phase in your life into another, and you're sharing that journey, whether it's sort of, you know, family, being a dad, moving into being a podcaster and a pundit, doing all these things. And I think if you're doing stuff that's real, people are going to engage with it, and it's going to be popular because there are going to be people that get it, and they've just got to discover you. So I think doing all of those things is just you allowing more people to discover you. And I hope that's what we can do here, is just tell real stories and sort of make it, authenticity is an overused word, but I think that's what people are seeking. So I think it's important that we keep doing that, and that always check ourselves and go, why are we doing this?
Yeah, 100%. It's, like, thank you for saying that. Not that I needed the reaffirmation, but sometimes when my lad calls me out, and it's like, well, why? And I am doing it for the right reasons. It's like what I'm doing, I'm showcasing what I'm doing, I'm passionate about it, and it is authentic. And on the flip side of that, and I'm not going to say this guy's name, but one of my favourite interviewers ever has now gone down this other avenue. He's famous, he records in the same studio as us, and he's going down the route of this kind of rage, clickbait style interviews. I can't even mention the lady's name, but she's the one that went viral for doing Body Blue. I mentioned her name. Yeah. And I'm seeing that now there's this movement with some of the best in the business to then platform these people. I don't want to be nasty to another human being, of course not, but in terms of her specifically, but these different people that are now entering the sphere of influence, And we don't understand what does influence mean now? Social media influencer. We need to get the influencers in. We need to do. And we've got this thing in the sport now where we've got people from Love Island coming in pitch side to the game and they're interacting with the players. And I'm like, what is going on here? Oh, it's a new audience and stuff like that. And I was like, okay, I understand why you would think that, but where's the authenticity of like media and skill and I suppose like the human beings that are influencing our children? Like, what does it mean to be influential now? And I just found it really interesting with the guy who's doing these interviews. I'm in the same studio as him, where he'd gone down this real authentic route, documentary making, to then I'm in the studio and it's like you've got these people. I'm like, how have they managed to sit in a studio with one of the best in the business? Like, and am I going to answer the question? I know the reason why. It's because at the minute it's about numbers. It's about why doing what I'm doing now. How is he with her, or how is he interviewing him?
Yeah.
And there's this kind of real movement now, or there has been this movement. I know, and I don't care if I'm wrong in this, but there's now this pushback now. You know,
I hope so.
Yeah, there is, mate.
Because I don't want to give those people airtime. We talked a little bit about the whole kind of Andrew Tate thing, because you're a male role model, and you talk a lot about men very unabashedly. You say you talk about men experiencing what it's like to be a man, and I think a lot of people find that really difficult to talk about these days in a culture which is still hugely misogynistic and disadvantaged to women. It's almost difficult to speak up and go, well, I'm a man, and us men, we feel this stuff, and there's not many people occupying that sensible middle ground, and you end up with people going down the angry lines of the world of sort of Andrew Tate, who want to sort of just put women back in the kitchen and treat them like objects. And I think we don't really want to give these people airtime. I think it's terrifying because I think young men and young women are growing up in a world where, if you spend your whole sort of youth sitting on the sofa playing Grand Theft Auto or Call of Duty in your underpants, and all your problems are solved by violence and murder on a screen, and then all your experience of women is Pornhub and they're just naked and doing unspeakable acts, on day one, the lens through which you see life is incredibly unhealthy. And then if those extremes are the things that dominate media, it's really not helpful for anybody to grow up in a balanced way. Yeah. And for those of us who have been around before that, I think we kind of need to try and bring people along on a bit more of a healthy journey.
Yeah, and you're rewarded for going on OnlyFans, and you can make millions of pounds, or you can go on a Love Island show and it's all about like enhanced like teeth and whatever you're taking to get to them sizes, like this real, and that's toxic in itself, because it's, the filters of life. It's not reality, even though it's called a reality show, for example. And that's just one example, but obviously going back and forth on a few things. And as we sit in this space of life now, say we as in me and you, middle-aged white guys who are hustling to make a decent living and also be good men, when you're sat in this middle, it feels like there is no middle. It's either like you're either left or you're either right, and both of them are so extreme and both of them are so negative that actually the normal decent human beings have been, I suppose, quiet, because we haven't known really how to contextualize or say, I'll be like, I don't really agree with that, I actually think that, but that's so far right that I probably can't say that I agree with that, because they're going to think that I'm there. And there's a real confusion, isn't there? And there has been a real confusion, especially with young men, about like what way do you go? Because I, naturally or instinctively, I don't feel as if, I think that that's right. I actually think that that's more right, but that's the aggressive approach, and that's the only way to go, and that's the kind of movement. So now we've had this kind of movement here to this kind of movement there, where it's our responsibility as good men to be able to bring that back to somewhere central and be able to have conversations and to educate. And I've got 4 children, 2 boys, 2 girls, and that is a constant thing. And I think we've done a good job of making sure that the girls feel valued, of course, and that they are good enough, but also that the boys are valued, and that it's good to be a boy, it's good to be a man, it's good to go out there and want to provide. And if that's how you instinctively feel, that you want to go out there and you want to earn and you want to be the provider, that's good as well. You know, that doesn't mean that you, just because you think like that, doesn't mean that you're a bad man. Like instinctively, intuitively, that's a good thing as well. And I think it's trying to get to that point. Everyone, you know, we've kind of gone back and forth on a few things. We're all looking to get centered. Do you know what I mean?
Well, I think also we need the ability to disagree. We need the ability to sit in a room with someone you don't see eye to eye with and realise that you've got a lot more common ground than you have things you don't agree on. And I find in life most people are fairly centrist if you really talk to them. And there aren't many people out on the fringes, but those people make the loudest noise. And the people in the middle are so afraid of looking too far one way or the other that they tend to just sit there quietly and have kind of quite small conversations. It's really difficult to reclaim that middle space because everything is so polarized right now, and anything you say, people love to take out of context and push in a horrible direction.
And change your mind as well by
yeah,
having
absolutely,
conversation.
by learning something
Exactly.
from someone. Yeah.
I've said stuff before and people are like, well, you said. I said, oh, did I say? Well, I don't think that anymore, and that's fine as well. Like I've changed my mind, of course, and allowing that to happen and be like, okay, well, we've had a conversation around it, and that's part of learning, right? Because a lot of your life is dictated by your upbringing, right, and how you're brought up. And you think about how old school some parents were, right? If you're brought up in that way, and as you go through life, like some of the stuff that my father-in-law says, I'm like, what? But he's been brought up in that way, right? And he hasn't had the luxury of having conversations with other people. And yeah, I think being able to change your mind and be able to be like, okay, actually, yeah, I've looked more into that, or I've listened to this, or I've spoke to so-and-so about that. Like, you were right, and that's good, and I was wrong, and there's no issue with that, because that's life. You're going to be right and wrong. You're not going to be right about everything.
I think we should make an effort to change our minds and learn something new. I mean, one of the things about living in what hopefully is still a science-based culture is science has an idea and they discover a thing and they go, with all the information we've got right now and the tools we've got, this is what we think. And then every so often they go, oh no, we were wrong. We've modified that, we've changed it, we've learned a new thing. And it's one of the greatest achievements of humanity, I think, is to change and move and learn and adapt and go, oh, we got that wrong. And I think it's incumbent upon us as humans to keep constantly checking in with ourselves. But you need the right environment to do that. And I think that's where sport, music, motorcycling, art, all of those things provide common ground. I mean, you know, I went to, on this trip in Wales, we went and stayed at this really nice hotel. And there was a box at the door and it said, leave your political opinions in the box. You collect them on your way out. And I thought I might nick that, actually. I might steal that idea. But I loved it. I loved that idea that, you know, and we always say on Bike Shed in LA, and we don't have it here, but on the mats it says common ground when you walk in. Because I want people to come in from different sides of the political spectrum, especially in America right now, where people are so polarized and so angry with each other. But they're going to come in and talk about motorcycles. It's uniting people, and I think sports does it, music does it, the arts does it. And I think we need more places of common ground so that people can have a conversation and go, well, I don't agree with you on that, but wasn't that an awesome ride that we just did? Because you're sharing 95% of the same ideas and ideals and experiences. And the bit you disagree on actually doesn't really matter, does it?
Yeah,
not really.
100%.
Because you're just going to learn from that other person's view also to tolerate their view. You know, I mean, I'm not religious, but I respect people who believe in a God. It's their right to do so. I find it baffling, but it brings a lot of people peace and comfort and gives them structure. So I'm not going to try and stop them believing.
Yeah.
And I think we should look at opinions like that, respecting other people's ways of life. But I think biking does give us an awesome base to do that from.
It's a cool industry to be in. Like I say, I'm lucky enough to travel around the world and meet different people. But when I come here, like the energy, the vibe, the staff, I get my hair cut over there. Is there tattoos in there as well?
We used to do tattoos.
Yeah,
we had a tattoo shop next door, but that's like herding cats.
Yeah, well, I know that friend of the show, Luke Wiseman, over, is he in LA still, is he?
Yeah, he's in LA. He's an amazing artist.
Yeah, he's going to do one for me at some point.
Oh, if you can get tattooed by Luke.
Yeah, he's agreed to it.
Yeah, he's a legend. His stuff's incredible. Yeah, incredible.
But it is a cool vibe. I love coming, and it is that kind of the connection. It's authentic and it's real, and Yeah, it's. We mentioned about opening one in Austin. I said to you, if I had FU money, right?
Yeah, well,
Franchise.
go find somebody. If anybody's watching this and they're super rich and they want to give Jim loads of money so he can open bike shed in Austin, like get in touch right now.
Be a dream, like genuine. I know the hospitality industry is a hustle. I invested in some restaurants. I've got 3 bars in London, so I know it's more than hospitality. So I say that on a
but that's the business engine.
Level.
So we do need that to kind of feed the beast.
Yeah, it's a hustle at the minute, but it's more than that. It's the I'm drawn to the kind of global community that you've built and the cool people involved who've had great life experiences, and in a world in which it's not just all about the bike. I think that's one thing to mention. Like, I brought the family here before. My wife's not into bikes and stuff like that, but she's this is cool, and she's picking up some of the clothes and like eating the food and having conversations with people that are similar to her, not just you're out and out Harley Davidson wannabes. Is that me? I don't know.
Well, it is and it isn't, because you've got this passion, and you love your biking. You've got your Harleys. Now you're going to experience hardtail chop and maybe have to do even more work on your back.
Am I going to struggle on that? Am I with the bike?
Do you know what? No, it'll be all right. Just choose your roads carefully. Make sure they're flat.
It's a kickstart though as well. That's going to be a struggle in
It'll
Scotland.
be all right on a Harley. They start all right. Yeah. But yeah, the thing is, it's visceral and exciting and amazing. But the thing is, what I love about it is conversations like this, because it gives you this common ground. I mean, I can't relate to being a rugby icon. I'm going to call you an icon.
Loosely.
Apologies. But I can't relate to that. I can't relate to being an elite athlete and going out the pitch. But you ride motorcycles, and that gives us this connection, and it gives me the ability to speak to you about stuff on a whole different level. And what I love about it is it brings incredible people together. I talk about this a lot. The very first show we ever did as Bike Shed was in Railway Arches up the road from here, before we had a venue. And I remember watching this guy who was this city banker, and I think he'd bought a Shinya Kimura motorcycle, incredible builder. Harley Davidson, where I think you give Shinya like 100 grand and you get a box about 6 months later, and he's built you whatever he wants to build you, like deal with it. And it's art, and it's incredible. He's an artist. And this other guy was a web developer from Brighton, and he had like a CB350 cafe racer. And one guy's mega rich with an incredible machine, and there's this guy, I think his name was David, with his little 350 cafe racer, and they're both sitting in deep conversation over a coffee, sitting on a table. And I know the only thing they've got in common is motorcycles. And I realized that was the magic spark. That was the thing that biking does, was bring people together like that.
Yeah, I also think that we have a lot more in common than most people would think. And I say we being men. I think most men are trying to be good men. Like, I genuinely believe that. And in this moment in time now, there's a real kind of push to realise that this is what needs to happen in the world now. So yeah, you can have sport, you can have bikes, you can have business, you can have creativity, you can have travel, you can have adventure, but I do feel as if there is this movement now of good people trying to come together for the better, by having these conversations and by having places like this to come and do that is super important as well.
Well, that's a really nice note to finish on.
Alrighty.
Yeah, I'll take that. Thank you so much for coming in. It's always a pleasure talking to you.
Yeah, it's been awesome.
And I know we'll carry on conversations like this until the end of time, every time we hang out. But yeah, let's both keep trying to carry on being better men and do some good stuff to make the world a slightly better place.
Yeah, I'm going to do some content on my bike as well, so you can let me know if it's any good, or whether I need to be present and just not do any content.
Tell your story. Tell your story.
Yeah, I will do.
Share it.
Yeah, I want to, and I will do. That's what I'm going to do. But that's just been awesome, mate. Yeah, this is awesome to be on the show.
Brilliant. Thank you so much.
Thanks, dude.
That's brilliant.
Cheers, mate. Oh, that's wicked, mate.
No, I love it. That's exactly what I want Shed Talks to be. The bike is the anchor, but then you talk about the other stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, did you see the Black Dog one?
Yeah. Was that with the
guy who built the one for
yes,
the Brad Pitt one?
I did, yeah.
Because so much of that story of that bike was about him finding purpose and giving himself. And you could see his wife glowing with pride over what he's achieved.
Because he's found something for him, which is super important.
There was a guy called Ian who was like this creative director at BBH when we first started Bike Shed. And he's kind of an interesting guy. He's really handsome, but really kind of quite quiet and quite self-deprecating, very talented as a creative director, and lovely guy. I haven't seen him for a little while, and but I remember when he got into Bike Shed and we were doing the shows, I remember his wife coming up and saying, "Oh, thank you so much for giving him something to be really passionate about." And I look at him now and I see a more attractive man. He's got this confidence. He's got a thing that's his thing. Because at work he's probably battered by the chaos of advertising, and then he's got to be a dad and he's got kids and he's got to provide, and you always live slightly beyond your means, don't you? Whatever you earn, you're always going to have a slightly bigger house than you probably should. And I think the idea that we gave him structure and purpose and pride and self-worth that was just his thing was really powerful. And you see that so much.
Yeah, confidence is cool. And I think you know when someone is genuinely confident or it's like a facade. I think confidence is cool, but I think that is based on like the stuff that you just said then. Like they have a purpose, they know who they are, they've been on a journey. You know what I mean? They've had it hard and they've managed to come through. You know, like I do listen to a thing. Are you recorded still? I did listen to a thing where they were talking about some of the best men are men who've come through, who've made it through.
Yeah.
You know, and they've made it through some really, really tough times, and they're the guys that turn out to be the great guys that have lived to tell their story. And yeah, I like it when you're with someone where you can see that they've been through it, but they're so present. You know, they're not. And you know, doing the podcast and stuff like that has not been easy, and you do it really well actually. Whether or not it's intentional or natural, it doesn't really matter, because some of these things aren't natural. What I'm about to say is the art of conversation, which I really struggled with, is listening. Is being able to listen and take in what the other person's saying. So when I do interviews now, I'll learn. Well, I usually have people that I'm interested in, but I won't have questions. I know that you'll have stuff in your mind that you want to ask. Because I found as if I'm looking at the questions, I'll be thinking about what's next. So are you not even in the conversation, are you?
I much prefer to pick up on a thing you've said and then go that way. I did try it with questions at the beginning, but I much prefer the chat.
Yeah, and it's difficult, isn't it? Because you want to stick to a narrative. Then it's not authentic, is it? It's not authentic to the conversation that you're having. And then one thing I've learned a little bit more now, which I feel as if I'm getting better at, and this is contradicting for this, but saying less is saying more. I know I need to say more on here because it's a podcast.
Well, also you're the subject.
Yeah.
If you're the host, it's slightly different. You should say less.
Yeah.
You're trying to get something out of the other person.
But I mean, even in life now, like I'll have an opinion. You know, I grew up with in quite a negative background and surroundings where a lot of it was opinion, negative opinion, or just opinion, but it came across as negative because it was so opinionated. So I found I'd have an opinion on everything and anything. It's horrible, you know, when you think about it. It's, you know, how someone's driving, or, you know, what someone's eating, or if their kids are on their phones. You know, I found I'd have an opinion on it. Whereas now I think it's super important just to, you know, just worry about yourself.
I think the other thing that's just made me think, as you were saying that, is one of my favourite phrases now I'm a little older, is I don't know. I don't know. Because I think surety is something men seek. Like you said earlier on in the conversation, I like to know where I'm going. You know, I'm going from A to B, because we seek that. We seek answers. It's like, you know, like men who won't ask directions would rather drive around in circles lost than actually ask someone where something is.
True.
But one of the things I've really learned as I get older is to go, I don't know, or I have an opinion, I might be wrong. And I'll tell you what, I'll go find out.
Yeah.
And I think a lot more people need to say that. I think we all need a lot less opinions, because if you haven't got all the facts, you probably shouldn't have one. Or certainly you shouldn't expect other people to listen to you.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, so we're obviously aligned with that as well. And, you know, one thing I didn't mention was chatting to another friend of mine who actually had a nasty accident. He jumped into a swimming pool, broke his neck. But he's not paralysed, but he's slightly disabled now, but he climbs mountains. He's got a business called Millimeters to Mountains, really cool, wicked guy, and he's doing a podcast in a similar space around positive males and like the conversation around that. And they asked me a really good question, and they never prep me for it. So they ask a question at the end of every episode, and they purposely don't prep. I'll ask you the question, see what you think.
Okay.
See what answer
No
you give.
pressure.
Okay, no pressure. How did he ask it? As a man, what is the most important thing that you want from your wife or your partner to see in you?
I think the honest answer would be to accept me for who I really am. I think a partner should accept all of you. And it doesn't mean you shouldn't improve your faults and fix your failings, but I think you should be able to have no secrets. You should be able to tell them everything, your fears, your mistakes, your cock-ups, the things you really want, the things that really matter to you. Because even if they're wrong and they're bad, your partner can be a mirror. They're holding up a mirror to you when you tell, because you see yourself through their eyes when you're telling them stuff, when you're sharing stuff. So I think I'd want my partner to hear me and see me and accept me. And if I need to change or sort things out, to compromise, to be in a relationship, that they're part of that journey with me, and that we're sharing that it's two-way. Because partnership and relationships and marriages, they are about compromise. They're about finding how to rub along sideways with someone who's your partner in crime. It's kind of you and your other half against the world. And so you need to be able to share all of it.
Here's the other question, probably more specifically. What do men need most in life? So as a man, what do you need?
Yeah. Purpose.
Yeah.
Ikigai, as they say in Japan. You need purpose. Why am I here? What am I doing? Why do I get up every day? And I think, if you ever see the documentary Blue Zones, which is about these areas where people live to 100 in really high levels, and they've got these little areas around the world. And apart from sort of good nutrition and health and sort of being in good shape, one of the main things they all share is purpose. They know why they get up every day. And you hear stories of people retire or their other half dies, and then they're kind of done. And then, give them a couple more years and they pop their clogs. I think we need purpose.
Yeah, I said, and this was like a true answer, and even on reflection, still stands the test of time now. I love feeling valued. That I am a good man, that I am a grafter, that I am trying to do good and trying to do best by my family. And the fact that my wife sees that and she appreciates that is everything to me. And I didn't know that. He kind of asked me, and I was like, I think that. Yeah. But how nice is it going home and, your wife, it's not like, oh, you go, you've not, it's actually like gratitude.
I think you've taken those two things and made them one. Because being valued is to have purpose.
Yes.
And you want someone to see your purpose and your value. And in a way, I've said the same thing. I want someone to see who I really am and be part of the journey with me. I think we've just said the same thing using different words.
And then it comes back to the initial thing that I used the buzzword for, simple.
Yeah.
The simple things, aren't they? Purpose and value.
Yeah.
To be a good person, to live your life.
I think it's probably those things that we've just talked around, trying to use the semantics of the English language. I think it's what everybody wants.
There we go.
So, let's go fix the world.
Exactly. Try and do it. Try, he says. Mate, that was cool, mate. Thanks very much.
No, brilliant. Love that.
Yeah, cool. I wish next time I come, I'm going to have more bike stuff. As in, be like, had to fix the.
No, I like
the
it
oil
as it is.
I got that. I'd love to do that. I'd love to be a craftsman. I'd love to be able to.
Well, you can always get into that.
Yeah,
but I think in terms of these chats, I think the whole point is to go off-piste. I think that's the whole point.